You ever get those ridiculous social media scams where people pretend to be somebody you're friends with and tell you you can make a lot of money? I know I do. It's why I'm very excited to partner with today's sponsor, Aura. Aura is an easy to use app that essentially packages a bunch of services to stay safe online all in one. Aura protects you from scammers and hackers. They scan the web for all sorts of data leaks and alert you as soon as they find anything. Aura is like the offensive line for a quarterback, consistently offering you protection from suspicious and malicious activity. They have a VPN built in that keeps your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. They'll even alert you if someone's trying to open up a credit card or a loan in your name. Did I mention they protect all your devices from viruses, malware, spyware, and any other things so the bad guys can't break in? Aura can even manage what your kids do on their devices. You can set limits and restrict them from specific apps. They have a password manager as well, so you don't have to rely on an outdated Rolodex or that sticky note that's been on your desk forever. There are apps that do all of these things, but there isn't one that tackles everything the way Aura does, which is why I say Aura is a 5-man offensive line and you're the quarterback. So head on over to aura.com/JKB. You can find it in the description and start your free trial today. All right, we are back. We are live, and we're going to be discussing something different today. This is mainly a football channel, but like I've said on numerous occasions, we will dabble in other sports, and the frequency of that, it varies. But right now, it is March Madness, and while I do have a lot of draft coverage to do, and I'm probably a little bit behind, I can't just not do March Madness coverage. I love it too much. I'm obsessed with March Madness. If you haven't been able to tell over the last few weeks, I've mentioned it multiple times. And so I figured it would be a great idea to go live. Well, we kick off March Madness tomorrow. I'm going to be at 2 of the games with my buddy Blaine Grisak on Friday. I will be at the UConn game and the St. Mary's game. So UConn versus Iona and St. Mary's versus VCU will be at those in Albany. So I cannot wait for that. But I figured let's dive in tonight. We're going to pretty much break down the bracket. I'm going to fill it out while we're live. I have filled out other brackets, full disclosure. I've already seen the bracket and everything. This isn't like a reaction, a first look or anything. But I figured it would be fun if I went through each game with you guys. If you guys haven't filled out a bracket yet, obviously you're more than welcome to sign up for my group. I have a free group over on ESPN Tournament Challenge, which I will post the link to right now. So let's do that. And let's see here. 1 second. Okay, I guess it's not letting me post it for some reason. So that's awesome. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here. I'll just do that. There we go. Okay, so it's completely public. Anybody wants to put anything in there, you can. 3 brackets you can put in. We have about 15 people in there, so the more the merrier. If you win I'll give something out. I don't know what it'll be, but I will give something away. So let's dive into this thing, shall we? Let's look here. All right, cool. So starting off, we have the South Conference, or the South region, so to speak. We got Alabama taking on Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They won last night. Not even going to hesitate here. I'm going to take Alabama. I don't know how many of you like Alabama, but if you don't know, the 16 seeds, well, they've only won once, and I can actually give you the exact results according to ESPN. They are 147-1, the number 1 seeds against the 16. The one upset was UMBC in 2018. They destroyed Virginia. Then Virginia came back in 2019, the most poetic, I would say, turnaround, losing in the first round as the number 1 seed. Then the next year in 2019, they won it all. So I'm going to take Alabama here. They are the top overall seed here at 29-5. They have a good good resume against top 25 teams playing the SEC, third in BPI, and they're third in quadrant one wins, which I've mentioned yesterday in the live stream. Those are good wins, essentially. Moving on, we have this game right here, Maryland and West Virginia. I'm looking at this game. Maryland is a much better defensive team, but West Virginia is a better offensive team. I think West Virginia, while they didn't win a ton of the games that they played in, they did play in a lot of quadrant one games. They played in 19. So I do like Virginia in this game. I think when you look at it, their offense is going to be something. I think their defense will be elevated in this one. I think they've gone up against tougher competition because the Big 12 have just killed each other all year. So I'm going to go with West Virginia, the number 9 seed. Upsetting. I mean, I wouldn't call it an upset, so to speak, between the 8 and the 9. That's pretty much, that. I mean, those are pretty much on the same wavelength. So I'm going to go with West Virginia here. Looking at San Diego State and Charleston. Now, if you guys didn't see my YouTube short or TikTok or whatever, I am big on San Diego State. As a matter of fact, I'm huge on San Diego State. They have a 9-man rotation that is absolutely lethal. You talk about just how important it is to get through games, stay out of foul trouble, be able to have the depth. There are injuries that'll arise, throughout the tournament. And when you look at San Diego State, 9-man rotation. They don't just have 9 guys. They have 9 guys that can come in and can contribute. And so I'm looking at this game and thinking, okay, this could be something here for San Diego State moving forward. I mean, don't get me wrong. 5-12 is, let's be honest, when we're looking at a 5-12 matchup, if you guys don't know about the tournament, then you're probably not going to know what I'm talking about, but it's pretty much a graveyard. You never really want to be a 5 seed going up against a 12. It's just not really it's not a good thing. It doesn't turn out well. History tends to repeat itself, and that never goes well for the 5 seed. But since at some point we will have to pick a 12, since 12, there's always at least one 12 seed that wins in the first round, I am going to not pick it here. I think when you look at Charleston, 31-3, really impressive record. They did beat Virginia Tech. They did beat Kent State, who's on the other side in the Midwest region. And, I'm not saying they're a bad team. Congrats on them. They've had a fantastic year, but I'm just not picking them over a team that I think is going to potentially make the Final Four, in San Diego State. So I love what San Diego State's doing. So for that reason, I'm going to go with San Diego State here. I think defensively, they're going to be a problem, but I also think offensively, they're somewhat underrated. The thing about, Charleston is people will look at this offense points per game here at, 80.8, and they'll be like, oh, well, they're 80.8, right? I mean, they score a lot of points. That's when level of competition matters. And when you look, the best team they played against was probably Kent State, since they're in the tournament, and they're like a 13 seed. So nothing against Kent State, but they don't have one guy that they're going to go to. They don't have a closer. And when I look at this, I'm not saying that they don't have a chance, but they're not great on the perimeter. And so for that reason and other reasons, I'm going to stick with San Diego State here. Taking the chalk, we don't really have a true upset. I wouldn't call that an upset. So let's look at this one. This right here, it's not the 12-5 that people gush over. But if you're looking for an upset that's very realistic, I mentioned Virginia earlier when they got upset in the first round as the number 1 overall seed and then came back and won the title in 2019. Virginia, a 25-7 team playing in the ACC. They are a good team, but the thing about Virginia that you have to look out for is the way that they control the tempo. They bring it to a screeching halt. They're all about possession. So the thing about Virginia, you might think, Jake, that's not a big deal. Like that, that's good, right? They control the tempo. They make everyone play their game. Here's why it's a problem, okay? And it is a problem. Virginia, while they may be a very good defensive team, 60.3 points per game, almost in the 50s, playing in a good conference, a Power 5 conference, they don't score a lot here. Notice this, 60.3, 67.8. And the big thing with them is that they keep games close. Whether they're winning, whether they're controlling the game, they keep it close. That is a concern of mine. And the reason it's a concern of mine is because Furman is going to launch the ball from three. And if you're looking for a team that can upset another team, you're looking for a team that can shoot threes, that can maintain possession, that doesn't lose easy possessions, that doesn't turn over the ball like crazy, and can make free throws. And when I look at Furman, okay, this 19-point loss to NC State and this 5-point loss to Penn State, not the best. But this is the first time that the Furman Paladins are dancing in the first time in 43 years, as it says right here. Okay. They are 46% from three. They are a very, very good team. From three, they're top 10 in points per game. You're 82.1. Now, again, what did I say about Charleston? Charleston plays the easier competition, easier schedule. You could argue Furman obviously plays easier schedule, competition, all of that. But in the tournament, when you have a team that's clearly not able to pull away like Virginia, okay, I understand survive and advance, but I think Virginia is going to keep the game too close, where I think Furman with their 3-point shooting, which is among some of the best in the country, I think Furman can get this upset, and I am going to pick Furman. And I think that this is going to be a pick that if you're really digging into it, I think Furman should win this game. Now, is Virginia a better team? Would they win a series if this was a best of 7 series? Absolutely. But I think when you look at these two teams in one game, this is a 1-game playoff essentially, I'm going with Furman because I think the way Virginia plays is going to benefit the way Furman plays. They stick around. If there's a 5-point game and Virginia is just milking the clock and then they miss a bucket and then Furman goes down, hits a 3 and then hits another 3 and so forth, I mean, that's how they win the game. And I think that's what's going to happen. This upcoming game here, Creighton versus NC State. I don't love NC State's resume. I kind of felt like they were more of a team that should have been one of the first 4 out, but they made the tournament. They're giving up over 70 points a game. They're almost scoring 80 points a game. My thing with the NC State, I totally forgot the name there. The Wolfpack. There we go. They're all about, keeping things going, keeping things moving, transition. I think really what it comes down to is that they're not a great defensive team, judging by the fact they're giving over 70 a game. And I think Creighton is built, they're a complete team. And so when I look at Creighton, I think this is a team that can make the Elite Eight. I think this is a team that can go pretty far. Sleep on them if you will. They are a strong 6 team. And I know this is another, sexy upset pick when you talk about a 6 seed versus an 11 seed. But in my mind, I think you got to go with the Creighton Jays here over NC State. This next one here, I'm going to go with Baylor over UC Santa Barbara, but I will say it with this caveat, okay? You look at the BPI, 124th. No one is going to pick this team, but we've seen this stuff before. I remember when Norfolk State upset Mizzou. Number 2 Mizzou got upset by number 15 Norfolk State years ago. And I remember that because that was the 115 seed no one thought had a chance. Sometimes there are guys that you don't think have a chance. Now, this team right here, I think, has the best chance to upset a 3 seed. I think the Bears are kind of, faltering down the stretch. And I'm not a huge fan. They looked great at the beginning of the year. They got some big wins against Gonzaga, against Kansas, against UCLA, Texas, but they lost by 26 to Marquette. They've lost twice to Kansas State. They've lost to Iowa State 3 separate times, and they split with TCU. This is a team that's been way too up and down for my liking. Now, Baylor has 4 quadrant 1 wins, or they're 4th in quadrant 1 wins. So they're 11-10. They've won 11 out of 21 quadrant 1 wins. We're talking about really good wins on their resume, but I feel like it's a tale of 2 halves of the season. And when you look at Baylor, I think they win this game, but watch out for this 14 seed that no one's talking about, UC Santa Barbara, because I don't think Baylor's getting past this second round. but I've been around before. All right, let's move on. Mizzou versus Utah State here. I'm not going to lie. Mizzou has a good thing going here, 6-4 against top 25. You know, they aren't a bad team. They've beaten Tennessee. They did lose to Alabama, and they got blown out by Kansas, but they did beat Iowa State. They did beat Kentucky. They beat Arkansas, and they beat Illinois. They did lose to Texas A&M twice. So Mizzou is going to be, I think, a team that people might look to maybe knock off Arizona State, but I would say not so fast, because there's something about this Utah State Aggies team that I just love. And I think really what it comes down to is they're going to be able to shoot the three. Okay, they're going to be a dangerous team, but I don't think they're a bad defensive team. I think they can score with the best of them in this tournament. And a 10-7 upset, you got to pick at least one, maybe even two. I'm going to pick the Utah State Aggies to upset Mizzou in the first round and move on to the round of 32. So that means the last pick here in the South, the first round here, I'm going to go Arizona over Princeton. Princeton, I'm not saying they're a bad team. You know, congrats. You know, they won the Ivy League over Yale. They make it again. It's, you know, nice to see them in the tournament. But I think Arizona looks really good. They just knocked off UCLA in the Pac-12 title game. They're a team to look out for. They could get hot. They're experienced. They're efficient. Arizona moves on. All right. I'm going to take a swig of this water. Jack Schuler, thoughts about Duke. All right. 1 second. Okay. So thoughts about Duke. They're getting hot at the right time. So I'm a little, it's tough with them. I think they are getting hot at the right time. The question is, how far can they go, right? I think they're going to be a heavy upset pick against Oral Roberts. I think there are going to be people that are, you know, remember Oral Roberts and what they did 2 years ago. And I think there's going to be people flocking to pick that. But I wouldn't count Duke out. And I think Duke's going to win that game. I think they're going to go on, and they'll probably, they might go to the Sweet 16. I think they're setting themselves up for a nice Sweet 16 bid potentially. They're very hot though right now. They got hot at the right time. That's what you really want to look forward to. So I'll say that. Exotic, appreciate you being in here. I'll try to educate you the best I can. Richard Cook, appreciate you being in here. I got Gonzaga and Purdue for the big show. I know nothing about college basketball. I know those teams are good, have been successful. I got you. Filled out my bracket after work today. Was really scientific and thorough with my gut picks. I like it. Yeah, if you guys are in here, please be sure to hit the like button. Share this with anybody who's having a hard time filling out their bracket, and let me know. If you want to drop your opinion. If you disagree with the pick, let me know in the comments section. If you don't disagree and you do agree, let me know in the comments section. But let's move on to the next one here. We got Alabama taking on West Virginia here. And I'll be honest with you, I think West Virginia has a shot to upset Alabama. Here's the thing. Alabama got blown out, 25-point blowout by the last place team in the Big 12, Oklahoma Sooners. Here's the thing about Alabama. They're the number 1 overall seed. They're going against a West Virginia team that's beaten some good teams. They're going against a West Virginia team that played very similarly this season to that Sooners team that Alabama had a rough time against. I still think the rookie Brandon Miller there, or freshman Brandon Miller, I don't know what's going to happen with the whole legal case and all that. I really don't know. But regardless, he is a freshman. We've seen freshmen fall under the pressure. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to take West Virginia to upset Alabama in the round of 32. I think West Virginia has played some really good teams. And while I think they've lost a lot of those games, you know, they're still 6-13 against Quadrant 1. That means they've won 6 out of 19 Quadrant 1 games. They played a ridiculous schedule. I think you get hot if you're an 8 or a 9, and if you can get that win, then you can move on here. And Alabama, I don't think they get out of the first weekend. I can't believe I'm saying it. They're going to be playing in Alabama. But I there's something about that West Virginia team that I think they were seeded unfairly in a sense. I think they're better than Maryland, and I think they're going to win that game. So we move on. San Diego State versus Furman. I'm going to move San Diego State on. Like I said, the 9-man rotation, I just really like where they're going. I like everything about San Diego State. You probably won't find other people as high on San Diego State as I am. So I have them moving on to the Sweet 16 to play West Virginia. Creighton versus Baylor. Now, this is one of those, okay, I gave the Big 12, the nod there. I move West Virginia on, beating Alabama. So do I do it with Baylor over Creighton? No. I think Baylor is a team that they're certainly capable, but I think they've lost that spark they had at the beginning of the year. They're not the same team. I've watched them. They're just not the same team. I think Creighton is dangerous. I'm going to move Creighton on to the next round. And then Utah State here against Arizona. I think this is a scary matchup. I think Utah State can upset Arizona. I'm going to go with Arizona here. Utah State, it really sucks they got this draw, because I think if they played against, maybe Marquette down here, maybe even UCLA, they might have been able to upset them. I think Arizona is just so hot right now. It's going to be hard to knock them off. So I have Arizona moving on. We have the Sweet 16 in the South. I'm going to go with San Diego State over West Virginia. I think the bus stops here for West Virginia, a really good tournament run to knock off the number 1 seed, to knock off Maryland, and then to fall just short in the Sweet 16. I think anybody in that West Virginia Mountaineers fan base would sign up for this turnout. I know there's nobody really picking them over Alabama. Everyone seems to think Alabama is 100% going to run the table. Not everybody, but a lot of people. I think West Virginia has a nice run, but they falter down the stretch, because while they are a very good offensive team, I think San Diego State is a good enough offensive team with an elite defense, and that, you talk about that rotation. I think they're going to be too much. That rotation is going to matter late in this. When we talk about the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, when you have a 9-man rotation that can handle it, I really feel like, that, in my opinion, I feel like that's really going to help them and propel them moving forward. Richard, hasn't Bama played mostly bad teams? So Bama is actually third in Quadrant 1 wins. They did play 3 Quadrant 4, and they played 7 Quadrant 3. They played 6 Quadrant 2. So they played 18 total Quadrant 1 teams. 18 total. West Virginia played 19. And then, the teams ahead of Alabama are Texas, who played 22, and Kansas, who played 24. So I would not be surprised if Alabama beat West Virginia. And in another bracket, I'll have that. But for this bracket, I'm leaning West Virginia. That's why I picked them over Alabama. But I don't have them getting past San Diego State. I think San Diego State is going to be a problem. Creighton and Arizona, this is fascinating. I could go either way with this one. And while I've leaned Creighton, I'm going to go with Arizona here to take down Creighton. I think Creighton is a very good, well put together team. I think they both have experience, but when you look at the better talent, the better experienced talent, I think that's Arizona. So Arizona is going to knock off Creighton. And then I have to go to the Final Four, San Diego State versus Arizona. You have the experience, you have the rotation. You don't have the rotation. A team that struggles, gets into foul trouble. Arizona, I think, has more talent, but I think San Diego State is going to do a nice job, maybe push Arizona into foul trouble. That defense is going to send them to Houston, and they will be in the Final Four representing the South. Okay, we move on to the East here. Who will San Diego State be playing in the Final Four? Well, Purdue, I think, is going to knock off Farley Dickinson. I believe the tallest guy on Farley Dickinson is 6'7", I believe. So that is going to be a rough go against Zach Edey, who's like 7'4". So I don't like that at all. Plus, it's a 1 versus 16. So I'm going to stick with Purdue here easily. This one is fascinating. So FAU is a team that I think is starting to become a little bit of a trendy pick here. But Memphis, they did win the AAC title game against Houston, who is the number one seed in the Midwest region. They are a solid team, but I'm not sold on Memphis. I'm not sold on FAU either. I don't think either of these teams are necessarily going to go on long runs or anything like that. But I think when you look, FAU 31 wins. They're a top 40 offensive and defensive team. You look at that consistency. They're not very tall, and I think that's the big issue there. Memphis, Penny Hardaway and his team, they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of athleticism. I'm going to take FAU here. I think FAU being a really balanced team, I think that's going to be a problem. So I'll take FAU to upset, air quotes needed, on that 8 and 9 seed team. FAU is going to upset Memphis there. Moving on, we have Duke versus Oral Roberts. I kind of already showed my hand earlier. Oral Roberts isn't a great defensive team, but they shoot the hell out of the ball. They're 30-4. They deserve a lot of praise. But if you're holding on to 2 years ago as to why you're picking them now and what they did 2 years ago, I believe when they got to the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed, that is a problem. They're 18-0 in their conference. Their conference isn't that great. They do deserve respect for that. They absolutely deserve respect, but Duke is getting hot at the right time. I am taking Duke here. I'm ignoring what I think many people are going to go with in the Oral Roberts 12-5 upset. I'm telling you right now, I think Duke wins this game and moves on to the round of 32. And that means this Tennessee-Louisiana one, another team that really isn't being talked about. Can Louisiana pull this off? I don't think they can. Here's why, okay? They struggle, and this is a big thing here. They are an elite rebounding team, but they struggle to cash in on easy points at the free throw line, okay? Their offense is inconsistent. To me, when I read that and then I looked into them, I found that to be a big thing. See, if you can't make free throws in the month of March, it's going to be hard to upset any team. I don't care if you're a favorite. It's going to be hard to win games if you can't make free throws. So now you're telling me that you can't make free throws and you're a 13 seed? That's going to be an issue. And they're not efficient on offense. And you look at Tennessee, an elite defensive team. I'm going to go with Tennessee here. I do think they're somewhat faltering it down the stretch here, but I think they're going to at least win that game against Louisiana. Moving on, I have Kentucky and Providence here. I'm going to go with Kentucky. I like Kentucky more. I don't think they're a great team, definitely not one of Calipari's best Kentucky teams, but they have a solid resume. They've beaten some good teams. Providence, to me, is a good team. I wouldn't be surprised if they won, but I just really think it's going to be hard for them to stop Kentucky overall. I think, right now Kentucky can score with them. Kentucky's a better defensive team. I think they're going to have a really hard time with Oscar Tshiebwe and stopping him in the paint. I think he can dominate any game. And as long as Kentucky lets him play, as long as Calipari just lets Oscar Tshiebwe play his game, it is going to be a problem. This is going to be a game where he just dominates. And I think he could dominate all throughout the tournament, if I'm being honest. So hopefully that's what they do. They just let him play. They let him cook, so to speak. I'm not 100% confident that's what's going to happen throughout the tournament. But if it's what happens here, then I definitely expect them to beat Providence. Moving on, we have Kansas State and Montana State. And while Montana State definitely deserves some credit for getting there, and they're exciting, they're an interesting team, they got destroyed by Oregon, who didn't make the tournament, and they got destroyed by Arizona. Both were on the road for sure, but they did get destroyed by those teams. They're 0-1 against the top 25, whereas Kansas State is, I think, a championship quality built team. I think they are not getting enough respect. They're 7-5 against top 25. And then when you look at the quad one wins, you talk about Kansas State being 9-8. I think they've just done an outstanding job this year. Now, the big thing with them is they turn over the ball like crazy. And I think until they get over that, especially, in transition, the way they want to run out and they just turn the ball over, that can get them into trouble. That can put them in the driver's seat to get upset. But I'm going to stick with Kansas State here and have them playing Kentucky in the round of 32. Move on to Michigan State and USC. I want to pick USC, but I can't. Okay, I think Michigan State, Tom Izzo has the experience there. I think they're a offensive monster. I mean, when you look at them, they score well. and they score in a good conference, and I think that's going to be an issue. I think they're just about the same defensively, playing in a tougher conference, 4-4. I'm going to go with Michigan State over USC. Then I'm going to take Marquette over Vermont. I think Marquette's playing some great ball right now. They're on a roll. They won their conference tournament, so definitely don't rule out, Shaka Smart's Marquette Golden Eagles. And then we move on here in the second round. Purdue versus FAU. All right, so what's going to happen here? Purdue versus FAU. I could see it going either way. I'm going to take Purdue. I think the problem with Purdue is that center, Zach Edey, who's going to win National Player of the Year, is going to be an absolute monster, and he's going to be really hard to stop. So if you're trying to find a team that's going to knock off Purdue, make sure they have some size inside. Otherwise, Zach Edey is going to bully them. I think Purdue is too tall. I think FAU is not tall at all, and I think Purdue is going to win because more than that, but I think Purdue's going to win for a lot of reasons. Okay, moving on. Duke versus Tennessee. I could see this going either way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go with Duke here. I think Duke's playing really hot basketball. Tennessee is not playing really hot basketball. They're a great defensive team, but I think Duke with their second chance points with Filipowski and then of course Derek Lively, I think those guys are going to do enough to really beat them. And I think Duke is going to be on a roll here going in the Sweet 16. We'll see what ends up happening with them and Purdue, but I do have them moving on to the Sweet 16. Yes, I have FAU over Memphis. Kareem, what's up? How's it going? Kentucky versus Kansas State. I'm going to take Kansas State. Like I said, they have a championship-built team. I'm not saying they will win the championship. I think they're a better team than Kentucky, playing in a better conference all season long. I think they've been battle-tested, and for that reason, I'm going to move them on to the Sweet 16. I think they'll have a plan for Oscar Tshiebwe, and I think they'll take Kentucky out of it. Then moving on to this, I'm going to have Marquette over Michigan State. Michigan State, really good offensive team. I think Marquette is a very well-rounded basketball team in general. So we're going to get a Kansas State Marquette showdown and Purdue Duke. So in this one, this is tough because Duke, they're young, but they have a lot of talent, a lot of young talent on Duke. And like I mentioned, rebound roughly 56% missed shots. This is a team that gets a lot of second chance points. So this is a team that could knock off Purdue. But the problem is, are they going to get those second chance points against Zach Edey? And I'm going to say no. I'm going to go with Purdue over Duke. I think, Duke has a nice run as a 5 seed getting the Sweet 16, but I think the number 1 seed Purdue will move on to the Elite 8. And that leaves Kansas State and Marquette. I could see this going either way. I think when you look at it, Kansas State and Marquette, like I said, very well-rounded. You can say Marquette's a better scoring team. They both have won 7 games against the top 25. Marquette has a 5-point loss to Purdue. They have 2 wins against UConn. They have a 26-point blowout against Baylor. They beat Creighton twice. They beat Xavier twice, lost once, and they beat Providence. They split with Providence, and they lost to Mississippi State by 3. I think when you look at it, Kansas State, their defense, like Marquette and Kansas State have similar defenses, but Kansas State's defense is in the Big 12. And what they were able to do to shut down Kansas and, teams like that, they beat Baylor twice. They dominated Baylor. They split with West Virginia, Iowa State. They beat TCU. They beat Nevada, who we'll see, soon whether or not they're going to be in the dance. They beat Oklahoma State twice, who just missed making the tournament. I got to say, I've been on the fence, but I'm going to go with Marquette. Fake to you. Yeah. I think Kansas State is a really good basketball team, and they got kind of a tough draw here. I'm going to go with the Marquette Golden Eagles here. I think that they are a very well-coached team by Shaka Smart. I think they got some really good players, Cam Jones for one. So I think they definitely have a shot, and I'm going to actually take them over Purdue. I think the thing with Marquette is they're so well balanced and they can run out and they can be a problem in transition. And I think that's how you're going to beat Zach Edey and Purdue. You got to get out in transition. You got to be able to tire him out. You got to tire that Purdue Boilermaker team out. And I think that's something that Marquette is going to be able to do. So I have them going to the Final Four, taking on San Diego State. So now we move on to the Midwest portion of the bracket, where Houston will take on North Kentucky. I'll have Houston winning that one. Spoiler alert, I'm not taking a 16 seed against a 1, and neither should you if you're filling out that bracket. Iowa taking on Auburn. This one is fascinating to me. I don't think Auburn's getting enough respect for their defense because Iowa, everyone wants to pick Iowa because they play in the Big Ten and because they scored 80 points a game. But the thing about Iowa here that's very alarming is that Auburn is playing in Birmingham, Alabama. And I know before you say anything, yes, that's one of the reasons I didn't, I was like tempted not to pick West Virginia against Alabama, but I do think it matters more when you're talking about an 8 and a 9 seed. Okay. And I think the thing about Auburn is that they generate contact. They go to the paint, they get to the free throw line, they can make free throws. And I think in a close game, which I believe this will be, I think Auburn's defense, and I think defense, big thing about March, when you're picking teams, defensive teams translate more than offensive teams. Offensive teams can go cold. Your defense can go cold, but not the way when you're shooting the ball, right? When you're shooting the ball, you can go cold. You can go cold from 3, free throw line, whatever. Defense, typically speaking, if you're a good defensive team, if you have good defensive mechanics, if you have good players that just know how to play defense, typically speaking, they're going to be able to play defense. And so I'm going to go with Auburn here. I think Bruce Pearl, great coach. He's had success in the tournament before. They haven't been the best, but I do think they pull off the upset, air quotes needed, on the 8 and 9. I got Houston taking on Auburn. All right, we got Miami and Drake. So we have not picked a 5 and 12 upset. We went San Diego State over Charleston. Then we went with Duke over Oral Roberts. So this is where I'm going to pick the 12 over the 5. I really like Drake's team. I think they're good defensively. I think they can score the basketball. And when you look, they beat Mississippi State. They could have easily made the tournament. They lost by 1 point. They were a missed three-pointer in the corner away from knocking off Pittsburgh last night. But I think that Drake, with the experience they have, as you can see here, is led by an experienced starting 5 whose average is over 23 years old. Okay. They have Tucker DeVries. I've been hearing a lot about him. He is a freakish three-point shooter. I think this is a recipe for disaster for Jim Laranaga's team, and I do think Drake is going to move on to the round of 32 here. I think they knock off Miami, and then down here, I'm going to go with Indiana, but I thought about it. Kent State plays a really fast-paced, up-tempo style game, but I do think that Indiana has way too much firepower, and so they have a guy that has a chance to go high in the NBA draft. I'm going to take Indiana here. They played in a better conference, and I just think overall they're more equipped, I think, to handle Kent State. They're not a bad defensive team either. Kent State is a better defensive team, so to speak, but I think Indiana wins that game. So we move on. We finally have this matchup because of the play-in. Iowa State taking on Pittsburgh. So last night, Pittsburgh won by 1 point. It was a very thrilling game that kicked off, what I imagine we'll see with March Madness. It's going to be madness. They won 3 more games than Iowa State. Iowa State has beaten some good teams. They're 9-5 against the top 25. They can be a problem. But the thing that I am worried about with Iowa State is that they cannot make three-pointers and they struggle making free throws. Okay. And so while I think they have a good team, they're a very good defensive team, and Pittsburgh's not the best defensive team. I think the thing that we've seen is that you got to pick in the tournament history, you have to pick one team that came from the first 4. And obviously it's not going to be a 16 over a 1. So your options are Pittsburgh over Iowa State, or down here, which we haven't gotten to yet, whoever wins this Arizona State-Nevada game tonight versus TCU. And I'll be honest, I'm hands off with TCU. I think TCU wins this game. I don't care who they play. I think TCU's really good. So when you look at Iowa State, I think they're in trouble. We've seen it before. Mike Breen's Notre Dame, Fighting Irish, they were the first four. Then they get in and they make a run. Teams that have that experience, teams that get in there in the first four, they get the butterflies out of the way. Then they're just playing with house money because they won the play-in game. They have the experience. They're not rusty, like they're ready to go. So I think there's something to be said there. I think Pittsburgh's going to make their shots. I think Iowa State is going to have some decent defense, but I think Pittsburgh is already ready for March, and I think they march on to the round of 32. So Xavier and Kennesaw State, the problem with Kennesaw State is that they just aren't very big. I think Xavier's going to move on here. This is a 3-14 upset that I just do not see happening. I think Xavier is a great offensive team. They've beaten UConn twice, who I really like, Creighton twice. They beat West Virginia by 10, who I also have going to the Sweet 16, and they lost to Gonzaga by 4. They're one of the best offenses in college, and I think they move on to the round of 32. This one right here is going to stump some people because I don't think either of these teams are going to knock off Texas the way they're playing, so I'll move Texas on past Colgate. But I will tell you, the way Penn State finished their season, they lost to Purdue in the Big Ten title game, but they had a hell of a run. This is a good Penn State team. I think when you look at it, they're playing well. You like hot teams, but at the same time, I think Texas A&M has what it takes to go a long way in this tournament. The problem is they're running into maybe the hottest team in the entire tournament in Texas. So I'm going to take Texas A&M here. And unfortunately for them, I have Texas moving on to the Sweet 16. We have Houston, Auburn. I'm going to take Houston, but I wouldn't be surprised if Auburn didn't get out of the round of 32. And here's why. Houston doesn't. Auburn plays in Birmingham, Alabama. Houston right now, big issue with them. Marcus Sasser is like their superstar player. Sasser's injured, okay? He might play, but they're saying he's going to be like 60, 70% healthy. I almost want to pick Auburn. I'm going to stick with Houston to gut out a performance. I think they're a very good defensive team, and I do have them beating Auburn, but I really think this is going to be a tough one here for Houston. I think they'll eke this one out and get out of the first weekend. Unlike Alabama, move on to the Sweet 16. Okay, so Drake and Indiana, I was really close to picking Drake. I think Drake can do it, but I'm going to stick with the safe pick and go with Indiana here. I could totally see either one of those teams winning, but I do think Indiana ends up winning. I just love that star power that they have. They got two really good players, Trace Jackson Davis, who, and obviously Jalen Hood, he is the freshman of the year in the Big Ten. So I like that tandem there, and I think that's going to propel them out of the first weekend and on to the Sweet 16. So I already have Texas in the Sweet 16. So where's this one going to go? I'm going to go with Pittsburgh over Xavier. Pretty much from, I would say, the last 10 years, almost every single year, there's been a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. I think you got to pick at least one. And if you're going to pick one, it's Drake or Pittsburgh for me, or Utah State if they get by Arizona. But I'm going to go with Pittsburgh to go on to the Sweet 16. I'm going to take Houston over Indiana. I think that defense is going to be a serious problem. And I'm going to take Texas over Pittsburgh. Texas is playing red hot basketball. They're one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest in the country. They knocked off Kansas to win the Big 12 title. They beat them twice down the stretch. They're 14-10 in quadrant 1 games. They've won the second most in the country behind only Kansas. And I think Texas is going to knock off Houston to get to Houston. And number 2 Texas will represent the Midwest in the Final Four. So now we have the West region, and I'm going to take Kansas over Howard again. Spoiler alert, not taking a 16 seed. Although Howard can shoot the 3, they could be a pain. I think they're going to keep it close in the first half, but I think Kansas runs away with it in the second half. Arkansas versus Illinois. So this one is interesting. No one seems to have an idea. They're very similar, but I'm going to go with the team that honestly is not as good against top 25 teams. I know that sounds weird, but this Arkansas team 3 years in a row with Musselman have gone to the Elite Eight. I'm not picking against Arkansas here. They have the experience against Illinois. I'm going to take Arkansas. All right, we move on. I'll be at this game. This is one of the two I'll be at. St. Mary's and VCU. I've gone back and forth on this. I cannot make up my mind, so I'll have to make it up now. We got St. Mary's, another well-rounded team, not the greatest offensive team, but a really good defensive team. And VCU, who has been described as just not really a St. Mary's team, but not as good St. Mary's team. I think the problem with them is that they're very good defensively. They force turnovers. And the thing that I have with VCU is that people hear VCU and they think of when VCU upset Kansas and went on that big run from the first four and went to the Elite Eight, right? Or I think they might have gone to the Final Four that year. I think it was the Elite Eight. Point is, VCU is not the three-point shooting team that VCU team was. So right now, they are not. St. Mary's has been known to fail in the first round. They've been overseeded many times. This St. Mary's team is different, and so I'm going to take St. Mary's in a really close game. If this goes to overtime, will not be shocked. VCU deserves a lot of credit. I think they definitely have a shot, but I'm going to go with St. Mary's here to hang on. We already picked the 5-12. Like I said, we picked Drake over, who do we pick? Drake over Miami. So we got the 5-12 out of the way. That is a prerequisite. You have to have a 5-12 upset. Happens every year. So we got that out of the way. I'm going to take St. Mary's. I think they're the better team. I'm going to go with my gut here. And that means that I'm pretty much going to be watching chalk for the two games, but I think they're both going to be entertaining because Rick Pitino's Iona Gales have a shot. Unfortunately, a shot is not going to do it because I think UConn is a fantastic basketball team. I think you look at their record, 25-8. They're 6th in BPI. All right. I understand they've lost some games that probably make you, scratch your head, but they're a very good offensive team and they're a good defensive team. I think it's going to be a hell of a matchup between St. Mary's. I have UConn moving on, getting out of Albany and moving on to the next round after a win over Iona. Unfortunately, I like Rick Pitino. I would not mind him winning a round or if he brought Iona to the Sweet 16, that'd be kind of cool. But, that's what I have. All right, let's move on here. We got TCU versus Arizona State / Nevada. Not really sure what's going to happen in that game. I don't know if that game is tipped off yet or not. But I'm going to take TCU. I think TCU is a great team. They're battle tested in the Big 12. They're 21-12 because let's be honest here, they've played tough teams in the Big 12. They're 8-11 in Quadrant 1 wins. They've beaten Texas, they've beaten Kansas, they've beaten Baylor, they lost to Iowa State twice, they beat Kansas State twice. They split with Virginia. They beat Iowa by 13, and they beat Providence by 13. This team is going to be a strong defensive team, but they can also score the basketball. I'll take TCU to move on. They're battle tested in the Big 12. I like TCU. So that means we move on with Gonzaga and Grand Canyon. I think Grand Canyon has upset potential here, but I'm going to take Gonzaga. This is the first year that I can remember where Gonzaga's actually played a really good schedule. Mark Few is no longer playing any of those cupcake games, okay? They played against a ton of teams. They beat Alabama by 10. They did lose to Purdue by 18. They lost to Texas by 19. They lost to Baylor once by 1. They beat St. Mary's twice. They beat Kentucky, and they beat Xavier, okay? This is a team that has actually been somewhat battle-tested. We've seen in the past, Gonzaga doesn't play anybody, but they're a great, scoring team. They're not a team that's going to shoot threes, though. They're a team that's going to, be efficient, take, those mid-range jumpers. And I think it's going to take a really good effort from Grand Canyon to win that game. So I'm going to take Gonzaga there. So we move on to Northwestern and Boise State. So fun fact about these two. Boise State has never in the history of their tournament, they have never gotten out of the first round, and Northwestern's never lost in the first round. Fun fact, this is the second time Northwestern has been in the NCAA tournament. That's probably why. So what's going to happen here? Well, Northwestern has beaten 4 top 25 teams, okay? Boise State's only beaten 1. They both have good defenses. Boise State has a better offense. I could see this going either way. The thing that stands out to me on their resume, obviously Northwestern gets that resume win over Purdue. They beat Indiana twice, right? But notice these, okay? It's kind of the same thing in any sport. When you go against your rival, it's almost like all bets are off. You can beat your rivals. You still deserve credit, but you know your rivals more than other teams. When I'm looking at Northwestern, they don't have any big wins outside of that Big Ten. Now, they played in a tough Big Ten, but they don't have any wins outside of that make you go, whoa. Okay, Boise State has a very impressive win by 15 against a very good Texas A&M team. That is something that jumps off the page to me. They beat San Diego State, who I'm very high on, getting to the Final Four. They've never won in the first round. They've never gotten out of the first round. They've never won, period, okay? They've never won. But I'm going to take Boise State over Northwestern, who's never lost. Of course, they've only played in one so far. So I'm going to take Boise State. We got, let's see, 2 10s and 2 7s. So typically speaking, you got to at least have 1 10 coming out of that. I got 2. You could go either way. And then UCLA, I think, easily knocks off UNC Asheville. There are a lot of people that are worried about UCLA's injuries. I still think they're a really good team. I know they lost Jalen Clark, right? But I still think they're a really good team, and they may not win it all, but they're going to go down fighting if they go down. All right, we move on. Kansas and Arkansas. This is not a guarantee for Kansas. I'm a little, as a Kansas fan, I'm a little concerned by that, right? This is not a guarantee for Kansas. Arkansas is a good basketball team. Like I said, Musselman has had them in the Elite Eight 3 straight years in a row. Something has to give, right? They played in the Liberty Bowl in football. Fun fact. So now they're playing again in the postseason. I'm going to go with Kansas here, but I would not be shocked if the Razorbacks won again against Kansas in a postseason. I think Kansas is one of the best teams in the country. They've proven that. They have 17 quad 1 wins, which is the most, I believe, ever. It's pretty impressive what they've done, the resume they've had. Their last loss against Texas was bad, but they did not have Bill Self, who is their head coach. He was hospitalized. And, I think really, as long as Kevin McCullough is okay and he's healthy, I think they can make a big run. So I'm going to take Kansas over Arkansas. That might be one that goes down to the wire, but Kansas is a great team. Arkansas, they're going to be a tough team as well, but I think Kansas prevails. Moving on to this one. This is going to be fascinating. You got St. Mary's taking on Connecticut, UConn. St. Mary's probably a better defensive team than UConn, but I think UConn just has everything you look for in a team that can make a run. And Dan Hurley had that team at 14-0 to start the season. They were not ranked. They were not a team that people were thinking could make a run. They're going to make a run here. They're going to get to the Sweet 16. I have them knocking off St. Mary's. St. Mary's did not get to the Sweet 16. It'll be considered a down year, but they did finally get that win out of the first round. They did get out of there, and, got to feel somewhat good about that. Obviously, it's going to be a tough one, but going against the 4, you're expected to be competitive. You're not necessarily expected to win, so I think I'm going to take UConn here. Kansas versus UConn. That is a nightmare of a matchup for a Kansas fan. All right, we move on. TCU and Gonzaga. All right, I think Gonzaga's getting a little overrated, although I do give them credit. They've played a better schedule than years past. I still don't love their top 25 record. Now, I don't always look at that, but when you're playing in the West Coast Conference, I do have to look at that. And Gonzaga is 6-4 in quadrant 1 games. And TCU is 8-11. So TCU's played in 19 quadrant 1 games. That means they've seen a lot. They've seen a lot of competition. They are battle tested. Their win over Iowa and Providence is really interesting to me. Those are good wins outside of the conference, showing you, okay, Iowa's a very good offensive team like Gonzaga. They shoot the hell out of the ball, and you beat them by 13. Okay, Providence, pretty solid team. You beat them by 13. They're both in the tournament. Gonzaga averages 87.5. But again, it's in the West Coast Conference. What would that be in the Big 12? What would that be in the Big 10? What would that be in the SEC? That's the thing. Okay? I'm going to go with TCU here because I think TCU defensively is going to give them problems. I know people are going to get obsessed with Drew Timme. I think there are a lot of people that think Gonzaga is going to potentially win this region, but I think TCU is for real. you could argue they're underseeded, although they've lost a lot of games, but they've played a tough game. So TCU moves on to the next round, and that leaves Boise State and UCLA. So what are we doing here? Boise State, UCLA. We got UCLA, who's injured. We got Boise State, who I don't think is great, but they did win in the first round in our prediction. And I do think that they could give a little bit of a scare to UCLA, but I'm going to take UCLA here. I think they move on. They play TCU. That should be a fun game. We got some great Sweet 16 matchups all across the board. I'm going to take Kansas over UConn in a nail biter. That is going to be a tough one. UConn's fantastic, and they look great metric-wise. They look even better than Kansas in some metrics. I think Kansas has a chance to repeat. I've said that all year. This is a team that shouldn't be as good as they are. They have proven it because they've won 17 out of 24 quad one games. So I have Kansas moving on to the Elite Eight. And then TCU and UCLA, I'm going to take UCLA here. And I would not be surprised if TCU won, but I think UCLA is so talented, and I can't rule out, Tiger Campbell and guys like that. So, UCLA's had the experience being in big games before. They're well coached. I'm going to move them on, even though they have that injury. All right. So that means we got the Elite Eight here. And this is where I don't know how many people in here are UCLA fans. I don't care what anyone says. I'm taking Kansas over UCLA. I think UCLA is a really good team. I think at the end of the day, Kansas has played way too many really good teams. And at the end of the year, I think that's just going to be a problem. So, I think Kansas battle tested, Texas battle tested, Marquette, they play that tempo that's really hard to beat. And then San Diego State, I think when you look at them, San Diego State is going to be a problem because they have that 9 deep rotation. They're a solid team offensively. They're a great team defensively. And that's honestly kind of what I would describe Kansas right now. So looking at it, I would say this could go either way. San Diego State or Marquette. Where are we going to go with this? All right. Tough to say. I am going to go. This is tough. This is really tough. I actually haven't made up my decision yet. I am probably going to go with... It's funny because they can, keep that tempo really fast-paced and everything, for San Diego State. But then San Diego State, if they get tired out, they have 9 guys. This is tough. Man, this is tough. I'm going to say San Diego State. I really like Marquette, but I really like San Diego State this year. So I'm going to pick San Diego State. And then Kansas and Texas for the 4th time this year. I think Kansas wins the 4th matchup. They tie it up at 2-2 for the year. Kansas, the first time they faced, they won. The second time they faced Texas, they had already clinched the Big 12 title, and they honestly really didn't seem that interested in winning. The third time they faced them in the Big 12 championship game, and I think that was the best thing for Kansas. They lost by whatever. I think they lost by 20. They lost Bill Self. Kevin McCullough was banged up. I think getting that loss out of the way, that one loss really, I think, helps you out in a sense. You could say what you will, but I think that's going to help them in the end, which I think Kansas is going to be the first team to upset in quite a while. I have them knocking off San Diego State. We'll put in a 68-62. Boom. We got Kansas Kansas running the table here. Look, if Kansas doesn't win, I think San Diego State has a shot. I think Texas has a shot. I think in order, I would probably go Kansas, Texas, San Diego State, and I'd probably go Kansas, Texas, San Diego State, and then I might even say potentially Alabama if I'm wrong on Alabama. So that's where I'm at. I wouldn't be surprised at Arizona. Now, I would say Arizona over Alabama. So I'd say those are the 4 likely teams to win. In my opinion, I think it goes Kansas, Texas, San Diego State, Arizona. Notice teams I'm saying right now. So you look over here. right? Arizona knocks off Creighton here. Arizona is in the Elite Eight against San Diego State. So the reason I said Kansas, San Diego State is that, I have San Diego State in the final. If they knock off Kansas, then they could win. But I have Texas as the third team that's most likely because they can knock off Kansas, and I think they could win at that point. And then Arizona, if they knock off San Diego State in the Elite Eight, I think they win. So I think either way, without, throwing too much shade at the East, I don't think there's going to be an East winner. I don't think anybody in the East is going to win. I'm not saying they can't, but I don't think they're going to win. I think it's going to be one of these three, regions, and I think it's most likely coming from the right side here with Texas and Kansas. But I do think that San Diego State has a real shot. People will say what they will about the Mountain West. I don't. I think this team's different, and I could absolutely be wrong. This could age like milk. Okay, and honestly, if it does, it does. I put myself out there. I showed you guys my picks. I hope it helped. I hope it. If you guys were struggling to fill out your bracket, hopefully this helped. I don't know if it did. I don't know if it didn't. Be sure to drop, a comment. Let me know what you thought of this video. I'm sure we didn't get many people during it because we're mainly a football channel. But like I said, we will dabble with other sports, and that will continue. But appreciate you guys sticking around. That did. I hope everyone has a fun time during March Madness. Hope your brackets do well, and I'll be back soon. Later, folks. You ever get those ridiculous social media scams where people pretend to be somebody you're friends with and tell you can make a lot of money? I know I do. It's why I'm very excited to partner with today's sponsor, Aura. Aura is an easy-to-use app that essentially packages a bunch of services to stay safe online all in one. Aura protects you from scammers and hackers. They scan the web for all sorts of data leaks and alert you as soon as they find anything. Aura is like the offensive line for a quarterback, consistently offering you protection from suspicious and malicious activity. They have a VPN built in that keeps your browsing history and personal information safe and encrypted. They'll even alert you if someone's trying to open up a credit card or a loan in your name. Did I mention they protect all your devices from viruses, malware, spyware, and any other things so the bad guys can't break in? Aura can even manage what your kids do on their devices. You can set limits and restrict them from specific apps. They have a password manager as well, so you don't have to rely on an outdated Rolodex or that sticky note that's been on your desk forever. There are apps that do all of these things, but there isn't one that tackles everything the way Aura does, which is why I say Aura is a 5-man offensive line and you're the quarterback. So head on over to aura.com/JKB. You can find it in the description and start your free